Thank you. Pathways to change. I am honored to be here today with you guys and to be able to challenge our thinking on pathways to change in the build industry. What I will cover in this presentation is more about how we think about change and how we think about innovation, what we consider viable alternative solutions and how we select those. And I will attempt not to give you too much practical solutions because I think the whole stands here today are full with many ideas and many solutions, and it's up to you to discover them while you are here today. So my aim is to little bit blow your mind, as we say, or at least a little bit to open and hopefully improve the world, or at least do my bit this morning here at Future Build. Now, our world today is not screwed yet, but we face some challenges. One of the challenges that we all talk about a lot is climate change, but we also have medical and health changes, diseases, the last years, pandemics, environmental destruction, and since recently here in Europe, unfortunately, also war and insecurity, to name a few. Altogether, they lead up to a VUCA world. And I hear you say, what is a VUCA world? Well, a VUCA world is volatile. It's also uncertain. It's complex, and it has ambiguity to it. In short, a VUCA world is a world in which we have constant, unpredictable change. And it is in this constant, unpredictable change that we have to find our pathway to change. Now, when we then look at solutions, most often the simplest solutions of all are the ones first chosen. They give us comfort and they give an answer to the problems and the challenges that we face. Unfortunately, those, let's say, simplest solutions are also often counterproductive on the long term, and they are not always the right ones for the next generation or the generation after us or the generation after. So if these simple solutions to complex problems are not the right answer and not the pathway to change, then what is the pathway to change? Well, actually, there are many ways to go from A to B, and there is not just one. And which path we choose to take, for me, is basically depending on two major things. First, who we are. Who are you? What is your background? Who raised you? Where were you born? What education did you benefit from or not? Which languages do you speak? Which media do you follow? This is defining who you are. This is also defining how you look at the challenges around you. So how you look at these challenges results in a different vantage point to exactly the same starting position. For example, a contractor on site installing insulation products is looking at the challenges of our industry in a totally different way than a manufacturer, or than a raw material supplier, or a banker who financed the industrial investments needed to launch new products, or an insurer who insured the trading risks, or why not an architect or a designer who tries to come up with the most sustainable, innovative way to build the building of tomorrow. All of these people look at the same challenge and want to go from A to B and have a different vantage point. Not only who you are and how you look at the challenges, but also limitations are defining our pathways of change. Legal limitations, laws, restrictions, guidelines, regulations, changes in application guidelines, changes in innovation and new raw materials that are coming to site. They are all limiting what we can or can't do. But also public opinion, bottom up, is limiting your thinking, is what can be done and can't be done is your public opinion. And the media, which are giving you or not giving you the information that you have or you don't have. So our pathways of change are actually narrowing by who you are, by how you look at the challenges, by limitations in terms of regulation and laws, and by public opinion and media. So if we're not careful, we have quite a narrow path or bandwidth of change. Now, and as we all know, a narrow bandwidth of change is not the way to innovate. Because if you really want to innovate, you need a lot of ideas and a lot of different attempts of trying to solve something. So I am proposing a 3D innovation. And what is a 3D innovation? Well, it's not something very fancy with virtual reality or a metaverse and all these type of things. I'm not that much digital literate enough. It's quite straightforward. It concerns three directions. First, a directional diversity, then a distribution and a diversity. What we mean by that is when we look at the direction, you can go straight from A to B, or you take a U-turn, or you can do a runaround, or you can try something new and fail, and try again and come up with a new idea. So there is not just one direction of change. There are multiple pathways, and we should not only look at one. Because if we do, eventually, we are only left with one way. And if that one fails, we are in even bigger trouble. Just as a reminder, one-way directional streets don't accept U-turns. Distribution. What do we mean by distribution? Well, I use the image, of a nice yacht with some people having a party on it. And I use this image to say we should challenge who is actually deciding on the change that we are going through. Who is in power? Who actually decides? And who benefits from those decisions? Are those people not accidentally the same? Or not so accidentally the same? And are we, unfortunately, not always taking every interest group and every stakeholder into account into this change? Diversity, you could look at diversity in the, let's say, classical sense of definition. Diversity of people leads to diversities of ideas, and this diversity leads to better chance of innovation. But also diversity of solutions. Let's not disregard or bar a certain idea too quickly, because some of the ideas that today are actually taking up and being successful not so long ago have been disbarred or have been disavowed and said, no, this will never work. And actually 10 years later and 5 attempts later, it does work. So let's not be too quickly with concluding something does or doesn't work, and keep innovating. Let's use the classical example of an electrical car, very much opinionated in public opinion. Does an electrical car, is it the future mobility for personal mobility? I don't know. I'm not an expert. But what I do know is that it requires a lot of raw materials, of which a lot of them are coming from disaster zones around the world, for example, lithium mining. I also know that all this e-waste needs recycling and reuse in 20 or 15 years, and that this is not something we have solved yet. Last but not least, we have massive infrastructural challenges for charging, recycling, production, international supply chains. It's not that straightforward. Am I saying that we should not drive electrical cars? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying do not consider it the only path to change. What about other options? So when we have multiple options, we need to make a decision. And when we need to make a decision, it's not 3D innovation. Maybe I should have called it 4D innovation, because we need to make a decision, and that's another D. But when we need to make a decision, we need to respect that, luckily today, we are in a democratic country, which means that our decisions are including consultations. They are including politicians who are hopefully listen to what we want and how we see things. However, that needs to be balanced by making decisions and by not eternally consulting and eternally thinking about what we should or shouldn't be doing. And taking some decisions also requires some bold and brave decisions. So at the end of the day, our 3D or 4D or 5D innovation attempts to widen the bandwidth of pathways to change, to not just have one or two, but have as many as we can in parallel and don't disregard any other ideas that today may or may not seem ready for market scaling, which is something you will see a lot when you walk around here today. So look carefully, because something you may seem may be market dominant in 5 or 10 years from now. I see 3 large pathways to change. One is to think about the structures in which we operate as an industry. For example, who really has the power and who really benefits from change? Look at the root cause and don't look at the results. Don't look at something that should change. Look at where it starts from. Who has the power and who can actually make the change happen? Second one, our operating systems. I think in an industry we have all seen our systems have changed the last years. What I mean by this, regulation, standards, guidelines, stuff like Hackett reports, and so on and so forth, Part L changes. Every other week something is changing in regulation and in guidelines. But if we ask ourselves the question, why are we changing this every week? Usually the answer is to reduce and to manage risks. Control the risk. But this is risk averse. This is actually stifling innovation. We are reducing the bandwidth in which we can innovate. And we have the biggest industrial challenge since the last many 100 years. And we have less options for change than ever before. So we should challenge the standards, the guidelines, and even the regulations to be facilitating innovation rather than to control and manage the risks they pose. Last but not least, alliances. We see a lot of bottom-up movements, including protests and people throwing soup over paintings and sticking their hands to asphalt. And I think all of it is well meant and people want to go from A to B. Let's not forget that everybody has a different vantage point to the same problem, as shown in the beginning of the presentation. And I think nobody wants some harm for anyone else. But let's not disregard any ideas too quickly. Some of the things that we are doing are very innovative and are really pushing the boundaries. And we are accelerating, and we should not only look at what is not good, but really encourage what is going in the right direction and cheer that. So in summary, to go from A to B, we have a lot of challenges. And we need to choose pathways. And which pathway you choose depends on who you are, what is your background, and how you look at those challenges. But we all have a challenge to counter our own bias and to counter our own background and our own way of looking at things. To challenge the regulation, to challenge the boundaries that are given to us by governments, but also by public opinion and media, and to challenge our own thinking and bandwidth. Because eventually, to really truly change our industry, we will have to rely on the integrity and the goodwill of the people in our industry, and trust them and trust each other that we are all in it to really make a difference. And that if at the end of the day we manage to do that, we will optimize and manage as many pathways to change that you can see here today, and try to increase our chances to succeed in the goal we have. And when it comes to Soprema, that is to build for life. Thank you very much.